Thank you for being here tonight. My name is Regina Seifert, and I am the lead policy analyst with the Child Care Assistance Program team at DELC, and I will be facilitating the conversation tonight. There are several others here for my team for support if you want to quickly introduce yourselves.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jen Evas. I'm the interim child care assistance program manager for the child care assistance program.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tara Valentin, and I'm a child care policy analyst on the team here helping out tonight.
Good afternoon. My name is Alma Amador, and I am a child care policy analyst as well, attending and assisting my team.
All right, thank you. Let's go ahead and go over our agenda. We already did our welcome and attendance. We're going to review the group norms here in a second. Then we'll review all the draft rule language, and then we will close out for the night. So our group norms bring an equity-driven perspective and approach, center children, families, and early learning professionals, stay curious and welcome other points of view, seek first to understand and then seek to be understood, stay present, be respectful with your words, be aware of the power and the privilege within this group, and we started on time and we will stop on time as well to honor everyone's time. Okay, tonight we do have 12 rules to review, so we will have to probably move through these pretty quickly if we want to get through them all. If we're unable to get through them all, don't worry. There will be a public hearing and public comment period coming up, which we'll touch on at the end when we talk about next steps for these rules. Does anybody have any questions before we get started? Okay, let's go to our first rule then. So our first rule is 414-175-0002. This is our definitions rule for terms we use in the ERDC rule set. We are amending this rule to add a definition for facility. This definition is being added so that facility is defined in a way that will include our new outdoor nature-based programs. So instead of referring to a facility in terms of like a physical structure, it refers to the individual, group of individuals, or entity that is responsible for the care of the children. And this language was taken from the CCLD facility definition to align our language. Is there any questions or comments on this rule change?
I unmuted. My name is Shannon. It looks like I might have an older version because the slides I had said that there was also an added definition for expanded child welfare, but it looks like on this slide that wasn't added. Is that true?
Correct. We had originally had added that, but then we took it off. It wasn't needed. We moved it into another rule, which we'll talk about in a little bit.
Okay, thank you.
And we have a hand up for Annalise Sheehan for a question.
Okay.
Yeah, is DELC going to actually go through the actual rule language, or are you just giving us the Rule Advisory Committee, a high level overview of it?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but we have gone through these slides before, or I don't know, Tara, did we just pull up the rule language before, or did we go through the slides?
I believe we went through the slides. We have a rules advisory committee PowerPoint created just for the RAC, and so we've went over the slides.
And the rule language was sent out in the packet to everyone.
Oh, okay. So the Rule Advisory Committee is not going to actually go through the rules. We need to go back and look and then bring those issues up to you as we go through the slide. Is that the procedure then? I just want to be clear on what the procedure is, because the Rule Advisory Committee is to advise on the rules. And so if you're not going to put the rules on the screen, I will take the time to go back and find the filing that you made with the Secretary of State's office so that I can speak. But if the rules aren't going to actually be on the screen and published, it's very difficult to actually discuss the rule or the rule language because it's not in front of us.
Annalise, all of the rule language should be in the packet. We can go ahead and drop that. Hopefully, I think we can drop that in the chat if you want to pull
Okay,
that up,
right,
and then we
yeah,
can
but
go
I'd have to
along.
go find the rule packets. So that's, I mean, it's fine, but I just need to go find it then. I wasn't prepared.
I can see if we can drop it in the chat here. I'm not quite sure about Zoom, but I'll see what we can do to make sure that's out, or we can resend it out if needed.
Yes, please. Thank you.
I feel like it might be a little challenging to try to flip back and forth, unfortunately. That is why we send out the packets on a few days before the RAC so that hopefully everyone had time to.
No, I didn't receive any package. I only received the email from I be invited if I want to participate. I'm sorry, this is Hildegard Miller.
Okay.
I received, I believe an attendee, Shannon, I believe, you were asking for the packet as well, and then you found it, correct?
I did, that's right. It was in an email that came, I believe from Regina on Monday.
Okay, so then everyone else should have received it as well.
I couldn't download. Okay, now I remember it's not downloading for any reason my email. It is a package, but it's not able to download.
Okay, so I think Jen was gonna put it in the chat. Hopefully everyone can pull it up and review it as we go through the slides.
I think we also have one more question from Vanessa.
Okay.
I just want to point out, as somebody who's been on many DELC RACs, this is not how it normally is. Usually the rule language is presented on the screen and we go over the specific rule language. It's not a summary.
Okay. I
Because
mean,
that is what the RAC is supposed to be doing.
okay. We can definitely pull up the rule language. Give me 1 second.
Yeah, I do apologize. We have several different RACs among different programs, and for ERDC programs specifically, this is how we presented it in the past. We're more than happy to adjust and go ahead and share the actual rule language.
Jen, I would
And-
like to disagree. I have been on several ERDC RACs in the last couple of years, and none of them have been presented like this.
Yes, I will concur. So it looks like this is Annalise, looks like the only rule you are adding or changing in and then renumbering is Rule 22 under this section means an individual, group of individuals, or entity that is caring for a child younger than 13 years of age or a child 18 or younger with special needs.
Correct.
Is that true that that's the only, we don't see this, I don't see the Secretary of State actual filing, but that's what the only rule change that I see under this section, the definition section. Is that correct?
Can you not see my screen?
No.
Okay. Share. Let's try it this way. Okay, can you see it now?
Yep.
Okay. So correct. In this rule, the only thing that we are doing is adding a definition for facility.
So the background behind this change is essentially that there will be a new licensing type for outdoor nature-based facilities. And our previous definition of facility didn't, it essentially tied it to a building itself. So we had to make some changes to our definition in order to accommodate for that new licensing status. So that's why this was added.
Are there any comments or concerns about the language?
No, I don't think so.
Why is the renumbered rule number 29, why is that in bold further down the page?
It is not bolded on mine. I'm not sure. I don't see any bold text. Okay, if there are no other comments on the rule language, let's go down to the next rule. So our next rule is 414-175-0010. This is our ERDC waitlist rule, which is the mechanism that we use to restrict the number of families that can be approved for ERDC. We are amending this rule to add a new ERDC waitlist income check. Families, in addition to having to meet one of our ERDC waitlist exemptions, will now also need to attest that their income is below 200% of the federal poverty level to bypass the waitlist. If a family attests that their income is above 200%, then the family will be denied and placed on the waitlist. That is the first change in the rule. The second change, I'm gonna have to scroll down a little bit here. The second change in this rule is we are also adding language in this rule to include a way to remove people from the ERDC waitlist through an ERDC waitlist refresh process. This process will allow families who no longer have a childcare need or do not need or want to remain on the list to have themselves removed from the list. This is a way our waitlist will be more reflective of the families who still need or want ERDC. Are there any comments about this rule? Yes, Annalise?
So part 7 there, the department sends periodic notices to individuals on the childcare wait list. Are those periodic notices establishing an opt-in or an opt-out process?
They would contact us if they want to remain on the list.
Okay, so I'm going to ask that question again. Number 7 says the department may send periodic notices to individuals. That does not say they're contacting you. That says that your DELC is sending periodic notices to individuals.
Correct.
So is the notice that they're sending out saying, contact us if you want to opt out, or is it saying contact us if you want to opt in?
Contact us. They need to respond to the notice within 30 days if they wish to remain on the wait list.
And how often are you sending this to people?
This will
Because
be a yearly process.
an annual process?
Yes.
Okay. Because I'm concerned about equity issues here. This is very concerning. Our union is very concerned about the equity issues of an opt-in and process. If you want to, that you have to reapply to be on the wait list if you want to stay in, even if it's annually, because this could require some individuals who are lower income, who do not have computer access, who do not have access to technology. This could require them to have to jump through extra hoops, may require them to leave work or miss a day of work in order to go down to the local DHS office to comply with the 30-day report. It disadvantages women who are working, who are single parent families. It disadvantages individuals, even moms and dads both, who are working hourly wage jobs where they do not have the ability to take off from work because they're not paid if they're not at work, or whose employers do not allow for personal leave. It disadvantages, economically impacts in a negative way adversely these people that will be impacted. And if they miss for some reason getting communication, if it's sent out by email and they don't have access to their email account on a regular basis, if it's sent by letter and they're no longer living at that address, they may miss that 30-day window and then they are taken off of the wait list. That also seems disadvantageous, and from an equity lens, that's deeply concerning that Oregon would want to remove individuals from the wait list in an opt-in process.
Okay. Thank you so much for that feedback. We
And
appreciate it.
Annalise, these are really great points. I just want to let you know that we have been working on a revision of the process to make sure that we can answer some of these questions. Though the rule language says that we would allow at least 30 days, the plan is to allow about a 2-month window, so a 60-day period to allow families to respond. There would be multiple methods of attempting to contact them as well. We're still working on figuring out some of the additional steps, like if we're going to be able to do a media release or something along those lines before we would do a refresh. But these are really good points, and I think
Right.
we have addressed some of them in our process, but we'll make sure that we have all of these captured for when we actually do move forward with that.
Right. Well, and I just want to reiterate that an opt-in process is prejudicial and inequitable to certain vulnerable populations. And it's not, look, it's real clear why the state wants to remove people from the wait list. Having 10,800 families on a wait list, give or take a few hundred, is probably very not, is bad on the optics. It looks bad for the Dems. It looks bad for the governor. It looks bad for the department. It looks bad for the legislature. I get why the state wants to remove people. I would strongly encourage the ruling out period if you want to be removed to contact them, the department. And if you do not want to be removed, you do not need to take action and leave people on the wait list. It's the least you can do. If you're not going to fund these families' childcare, you have an obligation to at least count them and show them respect for the fact that they are struggling and what they are going through by not having this assistance. I think Oregon, the whole state, taxpayers, the whole system owes these families the courtesy and the respect of leaving them on the wait list so that they can be counted and not removing them through some I didn't respond process. If we're not going to provide childcare assistance, public assistance that families depend on and that basically they've been promised, then I think that we have a moral obligation to not remove them from that list so that they can be counted.
I would have to agree with that as well. I think that having that process set up that way is not beneficial at all for families.
And honestly, people that I talk to that are on the wait list waiting for ERDC that want to come to a childcare program, they're really discouraged by the wait list. And if you give them the option to opt out, especially with the fact that it's looking like the wait list isn't going to change until 2027, those families are gonna opt out and get off of the wait list because there's no point for them to be on there. What's the point of sitting on a list that hasn't moved since November 4th of 2023? I mean, we're 18 months into this and nobody has come off of that list.
Yeah. Okay, thank you so much for the feedback.
Thank you for the feedback.
Oh.
No, I was just thanking for the feedback, and we'll take all of that into account. And what's the next rule, please?
We do have a hand that's up, so.
Oh, go ahead.
Yes. Hi, my name is
I
Laura.
can't see
and
whose hand's up.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, sorry.
Yes, you're heard.
No worries.
I was working in the office and now I'm home, so it sometimes glitches the microphone and the camera. Just want to make sure you guys can hear me. I work with childcare resource and referrals supporting providers who are license exempt. And they have been struggling also with getting children or supporting those families that need the care just because of the wait list. I had one in particular who got very discouraged after hearing that there's a wait list and doesn't know when it's going to get moving. And so she has decided to not continue with being a provider, and have heard a lot of opinions or a lot of those feelings in the community, which really saddens me because I don't know how to help those in my network that are having the same, problem with the wait list, and they're just getting like who was that, Vanessa, said about this, they're getting very discouraged about becoming providers, and our community needs them.
Yeah. Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for that.
Brittany, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I just wanted to echo what Laura said. My name is Brittany Steele. I also work with a child care resource and referral, and working with a lot of child care programs, whether they're licensed or license exempt. Many of them are choosing to leave and close their business because they're struggling to get families. And it's really sad to see when a child care program with a provider who is committed to quality care is trying to serve families, but families are just unable to afford childcare right now. And with the waitlist not moving since November of 2023, a lot of families are making it work without childcare, and they're finding alternative methods. They're, one parent's working mornings and during the day, and the other parent's working evening and nights, and they never see each other. And it's just a huge struggle all over our state. I've also heard a lot of programs who are closing, who went through grant funding opportunities through the state, and they've gotten those grant funds, and then they can't get children to enroll because families can't afford the care, and the ERDC is still on that wait list. So I think that providing the opportunity for them to opt out if they don't want to be on the wait list anymore would be a lot more beneficial than having them opt into it, because a lot of those families have 1, 2, maybe even sometimes 3 jobs that they're juggling to just make ends meet to even afford the childcare that they're able to afford.
Yes, honestly, I just want to thank you all for your feedback, because this is incredibly important for us to receive.
Just want to put in a
but
plug for everybody.
sorry, what was that?
I said, I just want to put in a plug for those of you that are concerned and have providers that are concerned. We are launching a large scale political action. I believe it starts tomorrow. The AFSCME statewide with all of our unions getting behind it. So please, if you want, I'll make sure that it gets out to the CCR&Rs and the early learning hubs to share with providers, and we'll be sharing widely on social media and whatnot. So we hear that, and definitely honor what you said about ERDC and the shameful state of the lack of funding by the legislature. So we're going to launch a political action, and we're going to see what we can do, but everybody needs to stand together and fight for this funding at the legislative level. So there.
Thank you, Emily. And I do just want to share, like, honestly, with the wait list, we've never had a wait list that has been in place for more than a year. I believe the longest we've had a wait list in place since its inception was about 8 months out of every year. And there was a period of time where it was 8 months out of every year we had a wait list in place. So we're really walking into new territory now where we have a strong program. It's a good program that has affordable copays for families, and it's a desirable program. And so we've come into a place where now we have a wait list that isn't moving. We have a caseload that is not decreasing even with the wait list in place. And so we're exploring options, but we definitely, like I said, your feedback is valuable. We need that, and your voices are heard, and we're taking note of it. We'll take that into consideration as we move forward. I do want to recognize we're about halfway through the time, and we've only made it maybe 2 rules in. So we will have to move forward, but we do have the public comment period that is open. Also, if you want to put anything in chat, we can note that in chat as well. But yes, thank you all for the information you shared tonight and for participating. But I am sorry we have to move on, but we do have to move forward to move through the rest of the rules.
Thank you, Jen. So our next rule here is 414-175-0020, which is our general eligibility requirements rule. And here we are amending language to include that families that are eligible for the new expanded child welfare will not need to meet ERDC income limits. This requirement to exempt these families from having their income counted for ERDC was mandated in the House Bill 2683 from the 2023 legislative session. The bill required us to not look at income or childcare need for families who are working with child welfare in certain capacities, which we'll actually review in a couple rules. Is there any comments about this rule? Okay. We will move on to our next one. Our next rule is 414-175-0023. Let me go back down to where the language is. Okay. In this rule, we are amending to clarify that the expanded child welfare families we talked about in the last rule will have their childcare hours defaulted to 20 hours per week unless there is a need from the family for more hours. The family can request more hours at any time if there is a need, and we can approve for any reason other than to meet a provider's minimum hour requirement, as the need for more hours needs to be based on the family's need and not the provider's. This process already exists for our categorical ERDC families. That's those who are receiving TANF. We are just mirroring this for this new expanded child welfare group. Is there any comments on this rule?
Not on the rule itself, but I would put a plug in for including a definition in the definitions for expanded child welfare. I think it's used several times, and I think that would be helpful to have defined for users.
I agree. I had to Google what expanded child welfare was because I had no idea.
So we did have a definition in the definitions rule, and DOJ gave us the opinion that it shouldn't be in there because it includes eligibility eligibility in sort of in the definition itself, and so they requested that we put it in a different rule, which we'll get to in a minute. So that's the reason why we also wanted to put it in the definitions rule as well, but DOJ gave us an opinion that it shouldn't be in there. So. Okay. Next rule. So our next rule is 414-175-0024. This is our rule that outlines the verification requirements for families. We are amending this rule to clarify that families eligible for a categorical ERDC can self-attest to everything except the immunization exemptions, because those need to be verified, and that we're also adding that self-attestation is allowed for income, childcare need, and hours for all families eligible for the expanded child welfare. Oh, and I'm sorry. Let me go down to the rule language here. We just did a little bit of reorganization of the language for the categorical ERDC, and then we added the language for the expanded child welfare. Do we have any questions or comments?
I do have a question. So am I to understand that expanded child welfare is a subcategory under categorically eligible for ERDC?
Correct.
I think with that, it reads a little confusing to have 5 and 6 separate.
Okay.
So five says that for categorically eligible, self-attestation is allowed except for a certain subsection, but then you go on to say specifically for expanded child welfare, and you have a different self-attestation allowed. It just, I think you might want to reconsider how that's being articulated.
Okay, we will definitely take another look at that.
And I don't know if this is my first time on a RAC, so I don't know if this is the type of feedback you are looking for, or if you really just wanted us to focus on equity issues.
No, this is fabulous. We want the rules to be easily understood by anyone reading them. And so if there are points of confusion, like, you know, we understand that categorically eligible, it just overall means like it's a simplified application process, but in the rule, it has to make sure that's clear. So we're taking notes on everything that you're sharing, and that's fabulous feedback. So thank you.
One of the things that I wanted to point out too is I believe the reason why we have them as 5 and 6 is because the verification requirements are not the same for each of them. And so we had to have them separate. But we will definitely look into it and make sure that there isn't anything that we can combine or make clear.
Yeah, I think you might just have to do something like an except for or something to delineate it, because the way it reads right now, I would assume number 5 applies to expanded child welfare as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. We appreciate it. Is there any other comments before we move on? Okay, our next rule. Our next rule is 414-175-0025. This is our rule that outlines what categorical eligibility means for ERDC. We are amending this rule to add expanded child welfare to the ways a family can meet being categorically eligible for ERDC and explaining how a family can qualify. So families can qualify for our new expanded child welfare by receiving child abuse prevention services, family reunification services, foster care services, subsidized guardianship services, or by participating in the voluntary family support services program. And we worked with child welfare to determine these categories of families that are easily identifiable in the child welfare system, so that the one system can interface with the child welfare system so we can easily identify these families. Are there any comments on this rule change?
Don't see any.
Okay. We will move on to our next one. All right, our next rule, oops, sorry, is 414-175-0040. This is our prospective eligibility and budgeting rule. And I think it's all the way at the bottom. Yep. Here we are amending this rule to clarify that income is not countable for ERDC eligibility for families who are eligible for the new expanded child welfare. Are there any comments on this rule change?
Yeah, this is Annalise. Going back to what we had just talked about,
Mhm.
with the rule that family under expanded child welfare would get 20 hours a week unless they documented a need for more than 20 hours.
Mhm.
So is there a situation where they might show a need based upon their income situation, and so their income situation would
Yep.
need to be counted in order to give the hours, or no?
Nope. They can just let us know that they, are working more than the 20 hours that it defaults to, and we would increase it to whatever they needed. And we would not count their income regardless. Brittany?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that I'm understanding properly. So when we're talking about eligible for additional hours under expanded child welfare, we're looking at need and income as two separate things. So if their need is above those 20 hours, that's going to be looked at separate than if they're eligible for the expanded child welfare, their income is not going to be counted.
Correct. Their income will not be counted, and then their hours, if they need above 20, all they have to do is request it, and we can increase that for any reason that is dependent on the family's need.
Okay, great. Thank you. I just want to make sure I understood that.
Okay, we will move on to our next rule. Oops. So our next rule is 414-175-0051, which is our copay requirements rule. Oops, we'll go back up here. Sorry. So in this rule, we're amending language to state that families eligible for expanded child welfare will not be denied ERDC benefits for having an unmet copay. This is aligning with our current practice for categorical ERDC families. These families are not required to pay a copay, so we would not be denying them if they have a copay not met on their case like we would for like regular or standard ERDC. Is there any comments on this rule change?
I see none.
Okay. Moving on to our next rule.
Sorry, just a quick question. I'm trying to process this quickly as I can. So for families categorically eligible for ERDC, is that because they wouldn't have a copayment?
Can I explain something really quick? This is Tara. So I think that the confusion comes a little bit because our families who are receiving TANF, who are categorically eligible for ERDC, in our rule set, we've identified them as categorically or categorical ERDC. And so that's how it's been presented in our rule set before we even implemented the expanded child welfare, who are also categorically eligible. And so at some point, all of this language will be more clear. It's almost like we have types of assistance now, right? So we have those who are categorically eligible because they're receiving TANF. And that's what we're referring to right here when we say families categorically eligible for ERDC. But we also now have the families who are basically categorically eligible because they have involvement with child welfare, which we're referring to as expanded child welfare. So I hope that maybe helped kind of clear some things up in terms of that terminology. And as we expand with the House Bill 2683, there will eventually be even more families who could qualify because they are categorically eligible based on other factors, but we won't be implementing those rules for another, over a year out. So just to try to help kind of make sense of the language that we have here.
Thank you, Tara.
Right, but if they're categorically eligible, they don't have a copay, right?
Correct.
Correct. If
So
they're
there's no
receiving-
copay to pay.
But they could have a copay not met from, they could have been on standard or regular ERDC before and not paid a copay, and they would have a copay not met on their case. And if they
Okay, so this is a
reapplied-
prior incidence. Okay, okay,
Yes.
okay, thank you. Because that it just wasn't clear to me. I don't understand why you would need the rule if they don't have a copay. Then you wouldn't need that to be a rule.
Right.
Right. I think that's why it didn't get in the rule to begin with. And then we had to find those situations where we see them very rarely, but they could pop up.
Are there any other comments on this rule? Okay. Moving on. So our next rule is 414-175-0060. This is our reporting changes rule. We are amending this rule to remove the statement when multiple changes are reported at the same time, then we'll have the same effective date. This is old functionality we used to have, but we are removing this language because it doesn't align with current one functionality. Some changes that are reported at the same time will have different effective dates in our system. So we're just removing this outdated language. Does anyone have any comments on this one? Okay.
Seeing none.
What was that, Alma?
Oh, it's just, I'm saying I don't see any comments.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Oh, you're fine. Okay, our next rule is 414-175-0075. This is our child care provider eligibility standards rule. And let's go down. Okay. We are just adding in this rule that the outdoor nature-based programs will be paid at the certified center rate for ERDC. This is a pretty simple change here. Are there any comments?
I see none.
Okay. We're making good time. All right. Our next rule is 414-175-0080, which is our eligibility of childcare providers. And I will scroll down. We have a couple of changes here. So here, our first change is that we are adding the outdoor nature-based program rule set here, and then they're amending some of their rule numbers for other rule sets for providers, and so we're just correcting them to match the new rule sets. And then below, way down here, oops. Okay, and so for this part, we are stating that outdoor nature-based programs must meet our provider requirements with a few exceptions that don't apply to them and don't make sense for their setting being outdoors. This would be things like requiring smoke detectors on every floor, which doesn't make sense if the care is being done outdoors. And we worked with CCLD on which requirements made sense for this program type. And so here we're just saying that the outdoor nature-based programs are not subject to A, C, J, and K that are listed here. Are there any comments on this rule change?
I see none.
Okay. Way down. Okay, our last rule is 414-175-0085. This is our direct provider payments rule. Here we're adding, oh, let me go down to the language, sorry. There we go. Here we're adding language that will give DELC the ability to deny payments to providers who are serving an IPV or are suspended. This will include payments to other sites if the provider who is ineligible is involved in the business in a capacity related to the reason why the provider is serving the IPV or the suspension.
And I can share a little bit on the why behind this change. So the suspension rules actually had much clearer language in the OARs. The intentional program violation, that's specifically around a provider where it's gone through a fraud investigation and there's been fraud that has been shown on that case. Especially the permanent intentional program violation disqualifications, those don't happen very often at all. And that language had not been updated for years. And so essentially what we did is we took that language and we just mirrored what was already in full for the suspension process. But I hope that helps clarify the why behind the permanent intentional program violation disqualifications. I want to say we've only had maybe 2 in the last 10 years. They really don't happen often at all. But because of that, we don't look at the rule language very often.
Is this determination eligible for notice and due process, notice and
Yes.
hearing?
Yeah, there are hearing rights around intentional program violations. Either there's a temporary intentional program violation and then there's the permanent. The temporary one is typically about a 6 month. I believe the rule says 6 months or until an overpayment has been repaid.
That actually wasn't what I was talking about, but thank you for clarifying that. I think that's an important point. What I'm saying is, under Part B here, if the department determines that they're not going to pay a provider at another site because the ineligible provider is involved, if that determination is made, is that appealable by the other program?
Yes, that would typically be through an overpayment process. So it would align with the overpayment process. There should be appeal rights, or not appeal, hearing rights, sorry, administrative hearing rights connected to those.
So if there wasn't an actual overpayment deemed, how would you suspend the other program from getting payments? The second location, how would you notify the provider that they are not eligible for payments? Would they also get a subsidy suspension notice?
No, I'm sorry. The intentional program violation is separate from subsidy suspension. It's not the same thing. It's through a fraud investigation. Typically, there's a waiver that's signed for intentional. I'm trying really hard not to use the acronyms here, but for intentional program violations.
Right, but the rule as written says when a provider is ineligible to receive payment due to a suspension or intentional program violation, the department does not pay any other childcare provider for childcare at the ineligible provider's site and does not pay a childcare provider at another site. So this is not just intentional program violation. This is suspension. So is the other program going to receive suspension notice that it's because it's connected to and involved with a provider that has been suspended at another location?
I don't believe it would be a suspension notice. They would be notified if there were issues with a suspended provider or an IPV, or I'm sorry, a provider who has an intentional program violation.
So they would be notified and they would have here that it's so if let's just say I own two child care programs, one on Smith Street and one on Jones Street. And my Smith Street location gets suspended. And then because I'm involved and I'm the owner and I'm taking the payment checks from the Jones Street would not be suspended, but would be given something else that says that they're not
Well,
eligible to receive payments during this same 6-month period.
it would only depend on if the intentional program violation or suspension was something that that transferred over to that other site. So for example, say I'm committing billing fraud. I'm billing for kids that I don't have. And then I go over to another site and I'm doing the billing at that site. So if the reason aligns, then that's where it would impact it. But if I was committing billing fraud and then I went and I was a teacher at another site, those don't necessarily, they're not the same job duties. The reason for the suspension wouldn't apply to the job duties at the new site.
Okay. So yeah, so I understand that, but then what I'm saying is how is the other site, I mean, is the owner at both sites going to get notified that both of their sites might be suspended or might not be suspended? Or how does the second location, if they are impacted, how do they know to argue that they are not actually, the owner isn't actually involved in that location and they should be receiving those ERDC payments?
For the intentional program violation, it's through a fraud investigation, so they would likely be contacted by an investigator to discuss the situation.
Okay, and what about for a suspension? I mean, I'm sorry to be beaten like a dead horse, but I don't, if you're gonna write a rule, it's fair to say what the intent is, right? And suspension is there. If there's no answer, then maybe suspension needs to, right?
No, this is how the rule currently stands for suspension. We're just adding IPV, the intentional program violation into it. So the suspension language does say that if a suspended provider moves, like say I'm suspended and I bring someone else to my site to just run the care while I'm suspended, that's not allowable. Or I'm suspended and I decide I'm going to open up care at another site, that's not allowable. Or the same thing, like I explained with the reason. So if the reason that I was suspended, but then I go work for someone else, but I'm doing the same thing over there. So that was already, all of those have been in rule for several years. This is just adding the intentional program violation into that same logic.
Okay, because this looks like brand new language since it's all underlined. So you're saying some of this language is already there because I think it's maybe under a different rule number.
I believe it's under the provider suspension rule, and we just took that language and then added IPV and put it in this rule.
Okay, so it's in suspension language and then it's here as well, suspension and IPV. So there's the rule is there twice in the ERDC rule set for suspension.
Right.
Was there any other comments? Can pull back up the packet here and go to the end. So we wanted to talk about next steps. Okay. So today obviously was the RAC meeting. The public hearing will be on May 22nd from 5 to 6 p.m. And then there will be a public comment period that will end on May 30th. Delk will be presenting the final rule language to the Early Learning Council on June 25th, and then hopefully our rules will all be finalized and effective July 1st of 2025. We have about 5 minutes. Is there any other comments that anybody has before we end?
Reggie, do you want to pop up the slide on the timeframes on the public hearing?
You can't see it?
We
We're
still
still
see your
looking at the
rule.
rule.
Sorry, Reggie. We should have
Oops,
told you.
sorry. Okay.
No worries.
I apologize. I'm not used to Zoom. Okay. So sorry. Here we go. Can you see it now?
No, I still see us.
Not quite
Oh,
yet.
there it is.
it's
Wait,
gone.
it's just
Yeah.
both. Got it. Okay.
Ah! Oh no. Oh, what happened? Oh, okay. Hold on. I'm so sorry. Oh man, now
No
I'm getting
worries.
frazzled. Okay, hold on.
You're totally fine.
One second. Almost there. Okay. Weird, it won't let you share your screen. So I guess you have to share your actual document. Here we go.
There we go.
Can you see it now? Okay, perfect.
Yes. So just noting that we will have the public hearing on May 22nd. So that's a few weeks out. But people are welcome to join that. Basically, the format for that is there's not necessarily back and forth on a public hearing. But if you have information or situations you'd like to share or feedback you'd like to give, then that's definitely a great place to provide it. The rule set's also open for public comment through May 30th, so that can be in writing as well. And thank you all for the time that you've shared with us tonight.
Yes, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good rest of your night. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.